have Julian Valerio from Fundamental Futbol Academy with us today. Thanks for being on. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
We started the soccer ladder because I'm a soccer mom. And as you know, Liam is in his first year with Red Bull Academy. It's an amazing experience, but it's such an unknown experience. And I know I'm not the only parent that feels, Yeah, so,
Right.
we're just taking any tips and insights from players and coaches and parents that have been through the journey and can share insights and tips. So, with that, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so absolutely. Very excited to kind of speak and yeah, give you whatever intel we can for sure.
Yeah. So I guess first start by telling us like your background and your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am my parents are both Portuguese. I come from my father played at a very high level in Portugal, even professionally and things like that. So essentially, they decided to come over to the States, and that's where my sister and I were born. Dad was my soccer coach throughout my pretty much my entire career up until about, went to college. Um, so just a little bit different than kind of what we're accustomed to these days, right? Having that knowledge and having that background. And at that time, the United States was still kind of finding their feet in terms of soccer and the game itself. So to have a mentor and somebody that not only knew the technical side of the game and things like that, but really knew the IQ side of the game and the knowledge behind it kind of just allowed me to express myself and be myself as I took that journey, right? So we don't have the luxuries of, being able to watch a game every day, essentially, right? At that point, it was, once a week. We used to sit around the TV and on those Saturdays, just enjoy the game, right? So very different than what the landscape is today. But yeah, having him as my coach, gave me a really good insight in terms of, both sides of the game, right? Technical and mental. Um, yeah, had a really good career at a youth level. We were, state champions, regional champions, things like that. It was very much a small local club that just obviously, as we continued to grow, just attracted more and more. Um, and then, yeah, had the opportunity to obviously play in college. Thankfully, went to a local school here. It was Division 3, to be completely transparent. But I made the most of it, which I think is, there might be a stigma around, Division 3 versus Division 1 or things like that. Um, the way I looked at it was, listen, I'm here. Let me make the most of it. Let me continue to push and kind of see what ceilings I can reach. And yeah, I was fortunate enough. I got a good coach that knew me even at a youth level. Um, that I joined the school and yeah, had really good success. Was an All American there, the only one in program history. Um, Couple years down the road, became yeah, and Hall of Famer as well. So it just really worked out that listen, those were the cards that were dealt, and absolutely just making the most of it, right? And then obviously, after soccer, had some opportunities locally, overseas as well. And then after a couple of years, had to get a job as well and kind of take advantage of that degree and make the most of it. And yeah, just been kind of following there, continuing to play, amateurly here at a high level. Um, and yeah, then obviously, as I had my own kids and got more involved with youth soccer as well, yeah, about 6 months ago, we started the business formally under the Fundamental umbrella.
I didn't realize it was that
Yeah, yeah,
new.
yeah, relatively new. I mean, listen, thankfully and gratefully, we've gotten some really good players that are able to kind of see and feel what we do and kind of how it's different than others. And yeah, just been blessed from that perspective that, 6 months in, we are where we are. And that's just a testament to all the people around us and kind of the people that trust and believe in us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, yes, so Liam trains with you on his off days, and I know you have a good amount of Red Bull Academy kids, don't you?
Yeah, so we have some as old as about 2010s, 2011s, and then we have some that go as low as 2015. So, yeah, been able to obviously this group, Liam's group has probably been the focal point and, kind of where everything expanded from. Um, but yeah, it's a joy to have them, week in, week out with us, and really starting to, peel some onions back and kind of see that evolution right in front of our face, right? And I think that's probably the biggest joy that I have is just seeing that evolvement from week to week. And it's not just the technical side, right? I think it's, to Liam, the confidence or understanding the game a little bit differently and being able to have that freedom that, yes, there's a pressure to continue to keep the standard and continue to level up. But at least from my side, I make it very clear that, listen, this is a free space, express yourself. Players have to be able to express themselves, and we just try to create that culture there. Agreed?
Yes.
Lee, do you think you express yourself? Oh,
I think I do. I think I do.
we won't put you on the spot anymore right now. What role does strength and conditioning play for the young players?
Yeah, I think once they start to get into that phase of growth spurts and kind of, growing into their bodies, I think that's when it becomes a little bit more important for them, right? Especially in terms of flexibility and maintaining that mobility, right? Because at a younger age, you have all of that, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, some people grow faster than others, but at least from my own experience, when I kind of hit my growth spurt, I could kind of sense myself getting a little bit tighter, hips weren't turning as much, things like that. So I think right around that age when they start to kind of, some as early as, 10, 11 years old and some as late as, 12 or 13, right? But I think at that point and is really crucial to really start to evolve from that perspective, right? Because you may be very fast at a younger age, but if you hit a quick growth spurt, you know what I mean? Maybe you lose some of that or you lose that mobility that I think is really important at Liam's age, I think is crucial to really start to evolve that. Again, not anything crazy in terms of, weightlifting or stuff like that, but I would say gradually evolving into that. Um, yeah, because you just start to see it at a younger age, right? When I came up, you probably didn't touch weights until you were 16, 17, 18. But between science and kind of different philosophies, you could see that the benefits are tangible, especially at a younger age, if done correctly as well.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, this is like definitely, I feel like a pivotal age for Liam. And I mean, his entire group. Yeah, kind of 11, 12-ish. Stemming off of this conversation, do you think the kids should have a rest day?
So I am a big believer in yes. I think and I think one of the questions maybe too was, what's been different versus when I grew up versus now. So transparently, in my youth career up until I got to college, we trained two, maybe three times a week, and then, a game on the weekend or a tournament on, Memorial Day or things like that. And, that at least from my perspective as a trainer and coach is a little bit of a concern for me, just because I see a lot of quantity over quality, right? And I think, at younger ages, it's not just the short-term benefits. We have to also look at them long-term, right? So, yes, a kid right now at 11 or 12 may be able to do double sessions or a tournament on the weekend and things like that. But at a certain point, it becomes too much, right? And are you still getting that value from every time you're training? And the answer is probably not, right? So, um, I'm always much more of the mindset of, listen, when we're together, we put our best foot forward. We work hard for those 90 minutes. And, from there, listen, if he wants to go out there and play with him, against the wall or go do his own thing, I think so. But from a structural perspective, team trainings and things like that, yeah, I think it's really crucial because one, from an injury perspective, right? Obviously, we know that muscles can only take so much. And the other thing too is, recovery, diet, all of that stuff plays a part. Where yes, you can go, go, go from a soccer side, but if you're not taking care of those other pieces, at some point your body's going to tell you, like, no, I need a break now. You know what I mean? And instead of being a day, yeah, instead of a day off, it becomes, hey, you have a 2 weeks or 3 weeks or, God forbid, something a little bit more serious from an injury perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, I guess a question stemming off of that too is how important is nutrition for kids, or when do you think nutrition really becomes like a crucial role, in their journey? I mean, he's 11, 12, but I feel like, we've got to start thinking about the amount of protein and veggies and
Yeah, and I think that also comes with, the amount of output, right? So, are we training 4 times a week, 5 times a week, and, a game or things like that in between? Um, but again, I always see that where Liam is right now, kind of that age is the one where, a little bit more starts to kick in. And listen, he's, at that age too, they become a little bit more mature, a little bit more responsible, to kind of understand those different components. So I do think probably around this age is the opportunity to really start to make sure, we're instilling good habits and consistency, right? Whether it's on the field or off of it, really important, right? Especially sleep, recovery, things like that. It's at this age, right? And then listen, hopefully, knock on wood, as the path continues, things become more intense, more aggressive. So might as well establish those habits now, so that this way, when it becomes that much more, it's already a routine, right? And I think that's probably the biggest piece of it.
How can players improve their soccer IQ?
Oh, that's a great question. For me personally, it was just watching the game, watching it as much as I can. Even if it's just picking out a player that's in your current position or just watching their movement, right? And listen, I know sometimes, the game just follows the ball and things like that, but understanding those nuances, of kind of checking over the shoulder, seeing where the space is. One, I think, is watching the game, and two is, putting yourself in those positions too. And listen, I know it's uncomfortable at times, but sometimes we have to be uncomfortable to be able to kind of, take it from there, right? And again, these are lessons that learn on the field, but also applicable in life, right? And I think we've all been through that journey. Um, and again, understanding, being uncomfortable, but I think also whether having a mentor or having somebody that's been around the game long enough, that has that soccer knowledge, don't be afraid to ask questions, right? Listen, I'm happy to, and I'm sure many coaches would be more than happy to, stay an extra a little bit longer, or, break down a film session or things like that. That just says it's not so much the what you should be doing in these situations, but also explaining why, right? So that it's not just, okay, it's black and white, but if the situation changes, you can still apply that same thing, right? And you've seen it in training sessions where, hey, you see the picture, right? And you can see things and you're able to call them out. It's just having that voice too that says, you know what? Let's go put it into effect, right? And then once you have that knowledge, you're not so reliant on the coach to see things or make decisions, right? You're the one that's in there, um, and have that ability, right? And one of my college coaches, great guy to me, and he said, "Listen, I don't have to worry so much about what's happening on the field because I know you have the IQ to recognize it and adjust where needed, right?" And that's not just specifically to me, but even to my teammates or the people around me. So again, I think it's a little bit of everything, um, but really being able to just be free, right? Ask those questions, um, and just have somebody there that can help you guide through that. Make sense?
Yes.
makes sense. Yep, great advice.
Did you play other sports growing up?
So one of the sports, probably the main one I played outside of soccer, was I really enjoyed basketball. Um, and it wasn't always, high level or, things like that. But a lot of the time I played was just myself as well, right? And kind of the positives that I saw from it was, movement. You're in a tight space, right, on a basketball court, so your thought process has to be a little bit quicker. And for me, it really helped me again to recognize where space was. And then when it came to a game and we were stuck in a tight situation, I already could kind of see pictures, before others, because I was able to kind of see it in a different lens, that allowed me to do that. I think there's a benefit to everything. Um, whether it's soccer, whether it's basketball, whatever other sports are involved. I think you can learn from everything, right? And I think that's part of kind of the culture now is you have to be a one sport athlete only and commit 100%. And I think at a certain point, yes, you do. Um, but at these younger ages, there's so many benefits from different sports that I think it's important to be able to play, even if it's just with your friends, right? Or even just in the backyard or things like that. Um, it lets you be creative, right? And it lets you see different things that then make it a little bit easier on the soccer field.
Yeah, for sure. I know when he was a little bit younger, everyone was like, he needs to be in all kinds of sports and do, have him do everything. But Liam never wanted to really. He just was really focused on soccer. So I just kind of went with that. And I think now we're at that age anyhow that soccer is our focus. But
Right.
we did start golf.
Oh yeah, golfing's fun.
Yeah, and of
Golfing's fun.
course, he's got a natural ability and I'm terrible, but at least, like yeah, in our downtime we do.
Golf.
Yeah, we enjoy some
Awesome.
golf.
And I think too, it lets us, yeah, it lets us mentally kind of, disengage a little bit, right? We have to remember that still kids, right? And be free and have that fun as well. And in Red Bull or either academies, right? The pressure can be heavy at times, right? And we always say pressure is a privilege, but if not managed correctly, it can be very heavy. Yeah, for sure. You're in the opportunity, right? You're in a good place because of the work you've done, and it's a privilege to be there, right? And that's kind of what we like to say. Um, but at that point too, you have to find ways to also alleviate it at times, right? Which is, golfing or just going out with your friends or different things that I think are really important.
I think like coming into this time of year, when academies and I don't know, I can only speak from the academy perspective, I guess. It's that time where they do cuts, for
Yes.
next
Yeah.
season. And I think Liam and probably many of your other teammates handled it. You guys handled it fairly well. And I think it was us parents that didn't handle, their process. I think
Yeah.
we stressed and like freaked ourselves out and we're like, what is going on? Have you heard anything? It's a
Yeah.
stressful
Yeah. Of
process.
course.
So, how do you deal as a coach? Like, how do you deal with the parents, or like, I don't know.
It's an interesting question, right? And I think it comes from a good place, right? Obviously, we want to make sure that listen, we're putting them in the best position that they can be. I have kids of my own, so I very much understand it. Um, but I think it's also again getting to a certain age where the responsibility almost needs to push on them, right? And listen, a lot of kids, if they're talented, are on good teams and getting the best training and things like that, where, I don't always see adversity as a bad thing either. And again, maybe not to an extent of getting cut or things like that, but like even from my personal journey, like, hey, did I want to go D1? Yes, of course I did, right? But listen, things happened and it was what it was. But I think it's also about making the most of the circumstances that you're in. So whether it's at Red Bull or anybody else, um, it's continuing to apply yourself, right? And you could use it as one of two things, right? Either you let it beat you up and you kind of lose some love or some passion for the game, or you realize that hey, it's an opportunity to improve and push myself. And hey, listen, what a coach might see now might not be what a coach sees in 2 years from now. And I think from a coaching perspective, everyone's going to have a different opinion. And even when I was going through my journey, I had a really close mentor of mine that played professionally at a high level. And basically what he told me was, hey, Julian, you can be the best player on the field for 90 minutes, but in that 1 or 2 minutes that one guy is watching or things like that, you might not be there, and that might not be what they're looking for. So I think it's staying true to who you are and what you want to be, and making the most of the situation, right? Whether it's one organization or a different one, you still control it, right? So put your best foot forward, make the best of it. I think as parents too, a little bit of that is, our own ego and thinking like, hey, it has to be here because it is what it is. Um, but I think too, they have to feel a little bit of adversity. And I know you're not going to like that, Liam. It's not fun stuff to go through. Um, but with the right support system, you know what I mean? One step back can very well quickly be, two or three steps forward. And I think, you know, if you ask anybody that's been a professional, that at some point there's adversity, right? And you see players at the highest level, national teams, EPL, things like that, that were cut at 15,
Look
cut
at
at 16, cut at
Tom
17.
Brady, Michael
Yeah.
Jordan. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody goes through it, right? It's that one path where it's, top of the top forever is very difficult. And what I say to, a lot of parents is the objective isn't to be the best 12-year-old or 13-year-old, right? It's a longer journey. That ultimately we have to support them as parents and as coaches and trainers, to put them in the best positions.
stemming from what we just talked about, how important is a child's like attitude and body language when they play?
Yeah, so I would say it's probably 80-20, meaning me as a neutral on the sidelines, potentially looking at a player or things like that. I'm not so much concerned about, yes, obviously their technical ability and things matter. But I'm really interested to see what happens when they lose the ball. What happens when, things don't come out correctly or, they do get subbed off. And I think a lot of that speaks to also, coachability and respect, right? At the end of the day, that, yeah, listen, you may not agree with the decisions, but at the end of the day, you know, the coach is the decision maker, right? And we have to accept that, and we don't always agree. And like I said too earlier, it's always okay to have a conversation. I don't think any coach will never say, let's not talk about this. Um, but I think, yes, obviously having the technical ability and the IQ and all of that matter. But for me, especially at these younger ages, I would rather have the player that's less talented but willing to put in the work and improve versus having the player that's super talented, but only wants to do certain things during the training session or only puts his best foot forward when it's a good thing. Um, because I think the other piece of that too is, recognizing where my opportunities are as a player, right? And being able to recognize them and say, you know what, I do need to improve on these. And, Liam's heard me over and over and probably sick of me at this point, but a big rooted value in us is the fundamentals, right? So every training session, we're going to do that first 20 minutes or that first 30 minutes of what many may call basics, right? Where it's one touch, two touch, things like that. Um, but I'm a firm believer that those can never be good enough. So we'll continue to work on them. We'll continue to press on them. And, some players view it in a lens as, hey, this is too basic for me or it's too easy. And, to me, that's kind of like, okay, it's not a good trait to have from my perspective. Um, I want that player that's locked in from start to finish, right? And whether you're a 10 out of 10 or you're a 6 out of 10, as long as I can see that, then I know from a technical perspective or an IQ perspective, that's where I can add the value to you, right? But if you're on that far side of the spectrum where you think you know everything and all of that, then there's only so much you can do. And yeah, there was a lot of players in my career that were beyond talented, and unfortunately by the time they got to 16 or 17, you didn't really hear from them anymore because of, again, that attitude or that willingness to work, that, yeah, unfortunately kills a lot of players.
Yeah, I feel like I'm hearing that more and more how important like attitude and coachability is. I've harped on that since you were like 7, 8 years old. Like, we are not going to pout or do any like, I don't know, crazy things that we do see some kids do.
Yeah, and listen, it's okay to express yourself, right? And express frustration, at least from a coaching side too. That's not always the worst thing either, right? But it's, again, going back to understanding, I think for players it's not just how to execute, but it's why are we doing things a certain way, right? And So a player might be subbed off with, 20 minutes left and it's 2-1 or something like that. But maybe from the coaching perspective, it's, you know what, I'm just taking you out so that we could put another defensive player in there. And you don't understand it in the moment because you want to just be playing and you want to be on the field. Um, but again, having that conversation after and just understanding, you know what, listen, you make the decisions, and good, bad, or ugly, it's on my shoulders, right? Whether I make the right one or the wrong one. Just like players, we make mistakes too. Um, and you see that, right? Where a player, from one vision might not be it, and then he goes to a different club or a different coach and then becomes the guy, right? So it's all about a little bit of, from the player perspective, is can you meet me halfway, right? And that's, I always say, effort and attitude are the two things that you guys can control, right? I can't teach you how to do that. I can put you in situations, but ultimately that stuff comes from you, right? Everything else, yes, we can work through, but those are the two tangibles that just have to come within, right? If you want it bad enough, then you'll have that. But if you don't and you just want to do the fun stuff, then, the ceiling might be there, unfortunately.
Definitely agree with you. We're running out of time on our end, but what, like, on an end note, what other, like, what advice do you have for the young kids that do want to continue to hit the next level?
Yeah, I would say just consistency, right? And it's not just on the field, like we talked about. I think it's every part of it, right? And listen, it's a hard road to get to those levels, right? But there's so much that you can learn through that, that's going to be applicable to your life, whether you want to be a doctor, whether you want to be a school teacher, whatever your journey and your path is. There's so much that we can learn from the field that's applicable to real life. And I think that's probably just having that consistency. And then the second piece that I always preach is just be confident, right? Trust in the ability, trust in the work that you're putting in, and just play free, right? I think that's probably part of the problem today is, there's so much pressure on the players that, they almost become a shell of themselves. And I think that's where, from our academy at least, it's that freedom, right? Express yourself. I'll never take anything away from you. What I'll just give you is a second perspective, right? That says, hey, instead of doing this, maybe think about this one, right? And you figure out which one works best. But yeah, ultimately, I would say, consistency across the board, in everything that you're doing, and just having the confidence and trust in the work that you're putting in, whether it's with your team, whether it's with a trainer, or just by yourself. Either way, we carry it forward, and yeah, it'll help you whether it's on the field or not.
I love that. That's great advice. I will say, when you were speaking, it made me think Lee's been training with you about 6 months, probably,
Yeah.
like right when you started. And we've
Yeah.
noticed a huge difference in his play and his confidence, just from like having started with you. So thank you. Yeah.
Really
Do you
appreciate
agree, Lee?
Yes,
And
I
I think
definitely
just
agree with that.
what you said about having him not be afraid to like make mistakes and like
that. Yeah.
play freely, like this is the time to do it.
Exactly. And listen, even at the highest level, you watch a game, right? There's mistakes everywhere, right?
I say that all the time to him. It's
It's
gonna
just
happen.
yep. And they've heard me say it over and over, right? It's make as many mistakes as you want, right? It's just let's just not make sure that one mistake becomes two, becomes three, right? We learn from it and we push forward, whether it's something simple or something more advanced, but ultimately it's just about learning from mistakes and we all make a lot of them. So,
All of us.
for sure.
Thank you so much for coming on with us and like sharing your insights and your story and what you do.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And yeah, looking forward to it. We'll keep working and yeah, we'll take it from there. But really appreciate the time and thank you guys for having me as well.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll see you
Thank you.
soon.
Bye.
All right, guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye.